as so many of the billionaires talk, we don't need the 99%. Because in the economy they've created, there's no place for life. There's no place for humans. There's only super profits, super exploitation, super divisions and inequality. Economy is the art of living. Crematistic is the art of money making. What we have is the art of money making. Thank you and greetings to all who joined. Thank you so much, Malcolm. You maintained, themes every year that really address issues of our time. And I look forward to interacting with you, Rajinwa. Even though it's over Zoom, I am so happy that these bridges across our big civilizations up growing in the midst of the multiple crises that has been created by a common history that we share. Now, my mind right now is going to how large parts of India were devastated for opium cultivation, and China was destroyed and then colonized through opium addiction. And that's how, in fact, if you really think of what the old system that has brought us to the brink is all about, it actually is totally encapsulated in how opium trade was the big money spinner. And I've read that many of today's big 1% got their original wealth through the opium trade, something worth following up as a common exploration between India and China. So the old paradigm that has brought us to the precipice, of course, has only one option if we continue on it, for the majority of people to go over the precipice, which is part of the design. Because as so many of the billionaires talk, we don't need the 99%. Zuckerberg has said that. The World Economic Forum says it on a regular basis. Their big advisors, like the philosopher from Israel, they all talk about, humanity will not be needed, except the few who control the rest. And then they actually, interestingly, he talks about Yuval Harari. He actually says, the only way to deal with this now is is drugs and digital entertainment, playing games on smartphones. So the opium trade comes back as the kind of economy they want. Because in the economy they've created, there's no place for life. There's no place for humans. There's only super profits, super exploitation, super divisions and inequality. Let me just run through some of the key features of this old paradigm that has created the multiple crises, including its distorted illusions of who we are and how we relate to the world. We are part of an earth family. We are related to the microbes in the soil, the insects that pollinate our food, the plants that feed us. We cannot live without other beings. We are interbeings. But the old paradigm, which began with colonialism, began with declaring those that were being colonized, who were actually the sophisticated societies of their time. India was 25% of the world economy when the East India Company was created, and then we were invaded. And they reduced us in a few hundred years of British rule to 2%. I'm sure it's a similar history for China. And how did they reduce us to 2% from 25%? Through extraction, through creating new systems that have no place in civilized societies. Colonialism began by extracting our wealth. $45 trillion equivalent was transferred from India to England. And we've written many reports how from the schools to the prisons to the palaces, it was the peasant work of India that was financing the wealth of England. But of course, with that level of extraction, what was left behind was famine. 60 million people died. And we're being brought back to that similar situation. Nearly 1 billion people are permanently hungry. Hunger and famines were always temporary, localized in space and localized in time, because the earth doesn't create hunger. And people would go back and start producing food again. But the structural hunger creation is in the design of the economy, in the way food has become a commodity, in the way trade in food comes first, not feeding people. 90% of the corn and soya of the world goes for animal feed and biofuels for the rich countries to continue to have their systems run. So colonialism created a whole new category of primitive people and civilized people, even though the ones who were colonizing us had no quality of civilization, of evolution, of high values, of holding things together. They worked with brute force. And this was then projected onto the rest of our relationships. Anthropocentrism was created, the idea that humans are superior to nature and other species. Capitalist patriarchy was structured. Patriarchy has been in societies, but it was never part of the economic system. The economic system was a system based on the household. In fact, the word economy, like the word ecology, comes from oikos, which means our home. Ecology is the knowledge of our home. Economy is how we manage our home. And women were the primary managers of the economy inside the home and outside the home. So capitalist patriarchy, all of the idea of apartheid, which is based on separation, created in South Africa. And the language of apartheid is an Afrikaans word, which says separateness. That you are Black, I'm white, I'm superior to you, and we must stay separate. Of course, you must slave in my mines and my factories, and I must grab your land. So the old paradigm is primarily a colonial paradigm, out of which grew the system that got the name capitalism, with 3 illusions. Illusion 1, that a construct called capital is a creative force. You know, the creativity, whether it is the table I'm sitting on, the wood came from the creativity of the forest. Turning it into a table came from the creativity of a carpenter. Capital did not have any creative role except an extractive role, which is not a creative role, because creation is to make, extraction is to take. Second illusion, as Adam Smith in his famous book, The Wealth of Nations, writes, we are born with competition in the womb, with the idea of competition and scarcity. No, the fetus is nourished by the mother and grows with the feeling of abundance and cooperation between the mother and the fetus. There's so many studies that now show how much that symbiotic relationship is. Another illusion, that nature is property, nature is raw material to be owned, traded, speculated on. I'm sure you will find similar things in China, but in India, it's something like 1783. Lord Cornwallis, with one stroke of a pen, declared the land and soil of India as the property of an island far away. That's when private property was created. Before that, land used to be the commons, used by individual families, but the rules of its use were always governed by the community at large. And it was never a tradable property. You could never extract the relationship. And if you look across the world, the takeover of Australia from the Aboriginal people when Captain Cook arrived, takeover of all of the Americas, 90% of the indigenous people killed, takeover all over Africa, takeover all of Asia. We're talking of a huge land grab. But it had pillars. And the two key ones that I want to share with you are, of course, my own field, science and knowledge. And I wrote a book, Staying Alive, to try and figure out why is it that my sisters of the Chipko movement, Chipko was the movement of coming out to hug the tree. I said, how is it my sisters see the forest as living? They see the forest as a source of water, the source of soil, the source of oxygen. And the colonial system, which continued after independence, sees the forest as a timber mine. So I went to the roots of this construction of the world. I read every book of the founding fathers of science, books by the Bacons and the Descartes. And Bacon actually was given the task as Chancellor of England to not just do the witch hunts in England, but he became the father of modern science. And he called his book The Birth of Masculine Time. So far, knowledge has been effeminate, the knowledge of relationships with the living nature. Now we must subjugate nature and turn her into a slave to exploit her. And that book was called The Birth of Masculine Time. It's a capitalist patriarchal text. And nature was in fact declared dead. And a dead earth was very convenient to extraction, it was very, very convenient to colonialism. Combined then with the creation of private property, which was then legitimized by the writings of Mr. Locke. Yeah. So you have a father of modern economics, Mr. Adam Smith. You have a father of modern science, Mr. Bacon. You have a father of property and governance, Mr. Locke. You have a father of politics and power, Mr. Hobbes. And if you read, I read these books in my very mature years. And I said, how is it that they're still taught as classics in our universities to shape the minds of our young people, to live in illusions forever? The illusion of a reductionist mechanistic science. There is no bigger illusion than that. Because when you construct the living world as a dead earth, when you shape living systems that are self-organized, complex, interactive, and symbiosis, you create the ecological crisis. When you create private property, you basically create the enclosures of the commons, because all societies have managed ever sustains life as a commons, our water systems, our land and soil systems, our forest and biodiversity systems. To turn each of these into property is the beginning of the ecological crisis. You were introduced to the movement Navdanya started. I started it because the corporations were talking about owning the sea through patents. And to do that, to introduce GMOs. And I said, but you don't make the seed. The seed is a continuity of creation, of evolution. It's the combination of the creativity of nature and the creativity of our peasant farmers. How can a Monsanto steal our cotton and put a patent on it, steal the soybean, Asian crop, and put hundreds of patents on GMO soybean and destroy all of Argentina, all of Brazil, all of the Midwest of the United States? So the whole epistemic paradigm has brought us to the edge because we don't even know how to think anymore about a living world and about life. Then the economy defined around capital, tells you nothing about how the economy really works. It is what Aristotle called primatistics. Economy is the art of living. Primatistic is the art of money making. What we have is the art of money making, so that we have a handful of billionaires who can make 500 billion in a year. Just in this last 6 months, the top few billionaires have made 800 billion more. Do they do anything? No. One sells junk fashion. Yeah, the Paris group of fast fashion and designer fashion, Elon Musk, and the tech billionaires. The tech billionaires created by paying no taxes and by converting what is a commons, the basic codes, the basic software, into patented property, collecting royalties out of every action we have with our computers and our machines. So the economy was reduced to the art of money making. Profits was the driving force. Private property was an important thing. I mean, without patents, Monsanto wouldn't be the big corporation it is. Now that it's bought out by Bayer, the profits come from collecting royalties from peasants. And just like Indian peasants were pushed to famine by the extraction of the old colonialism, our farmers have been pushed to suicide by the extractivism of the new colonialism. We've lost 400,000 farmers to suicide since 1995, when globalization started and these corporations were able to enter our society. And the old seeds disappeared and the corporate seeds entered. That's why we created community seed banks, and we've actually created more than 150 by now. And these seed banks have seen peasants through cyclones and drought, but most importantly, just having your own seed means you don't spend huge money buying costly seed, buying it every year, getting into debt, losing your land, and committing suicide. So they're seeds of suicide, and they're seeds of life, and seeds of freedom, and seeds of hope. And that's what Navdanya is dedicated to. The dominant economy is based on extraction. Extraction from nature, extraction from society. In fact, the work on surplus value is about extraction. Extracting the value that labor creates. Extracting the value that nature creates. And a big part of this is now a totally cooked up measure that began with the war. During the wars, they needed bigger armies, bigger jet planes, and they created the category of GDP, the gross domestic product. And in the national system of accounting, it says very clearly, if you produce what you consume, you don't produce. So nature's work disappeared because nature produces water and consumes water. Nature produces food and uses food to renew the food system. Women in the sustenance economy produce and consume. Sustainable societies produce and consume. So all of the real economies were turned to zero. And the extractive economy was all that was counted. But as I said earlier, extraction is not a creative act. Extraction takes what has been created by nature and society, and in the taking counts it as created by capital. The GDP is now being questioned hugely. Between the reductionist mechanistic paradigm of knowledge and war technologies, particularly in Hitler's Germany, we got the model of industrial agriculture. I wrote a book called The Violence of the Green Revolution. And since then, I've done a lot more research. The fertilizers came from the same companies that made explosives and bombs. And while the armies were fighting, the US corporations and the IG Farben and the German corporations were one. There was Standard Oil, which provided the fossil fuels, and IG Farben, one company. There was Mobe, Bayer, and Monsanto. They all worked as one, I call it the poison cartel. And what did that give us? How did it push it to us to a brink? Added with the WTO trade rules. The WTO trade rules on ag, actually, trade was going on before. The only thing that got added with the Uruguay round of GATT and WTO is 3 treaties. First, on intellectual property, owning the seed, which is what I was fighting and we resisted. We said seed is not a creation of Monsanto. Patents should not be taken on seed, and this is still my life's commitment. Cargill, the world's biggest, and the treaty was written by Monsanto. It said we were the patient, diagnostician, physician all in one. Cargill, the biggest grain trader. The vice president was deputed to lead the US negotiations. The treaty of WTO is written by Cargill. And what were they looking for? Capturing other markets. That's it. That was their only objective, and they have. I have watched how in my country, the entire edible oil economy was destroyed, the entire cotton economy was destroyed, and how Africa, most of the countries had enough food before globalization and structural adjustment. Today, most of them are import dependent, and the imports come from these giant corporations who grow no food, who do no work in a field. They merely trade. It's an extractive system. And I remember particularly in the year, I think it was 2002, the World Bank told us that we cannot store grain. It's a financial waste. They forced us to export our wheat. Our wheat gets harvested in April. We were forced to export 2 million tons, but we needed that wheat. So come October, we were having riots for food. We re-imported 2 million tons. We exported at 60 rupees, $60 a ton. We re-imported at $120 a ton. The exports were done by Cargill, the imports were done by Cargill. In my view, actually, their ships were still sitting in the Indian harbors. It's just that they doubled what they earned. And we lost, the poor people lost food, and our country lost foreign exchange. And this is the pattern on every aspect of food crisis today. And then the third crazy treaty, particularly for societies like India and China, where we have the most sophisticated cuisine, diversity of foods. Pepsi and Coke, the junk food industry, and Nestle, wrote a treaty called the Sanitary and Phytosanitary Agreement, which basically is about safety. They declared all artisanal food, all local food, all food made by women, all food sold in street corners, all food that was made by hand as illegal. They criminalized it. And I have watched it in my country, how all the indigenous foods disappeared. Cold press mills that produce the purest oils, banned. Imports of soya and palm oil flood our market, 70% of our dependence, even though we were more than self-sufficient in edible oils and mustard and sesame and groundnut and coconut. We're the richest oilseed culture. Biodiversity disappeared. In my view, 90% biodiversity disappeared with the industrial monocultures. Why are we growing soya bean in the Amazon? Not because the Amazon Indians eat soya bean. It's for the biofuel and animal feed industry. A little portion goes into processed food. A billion people, as I said, are hungry. And a big part of my work in my book, Soil Not Oil, is at that point I assessed 45%, 45%, but my assessment is about 50% of the greenhouse gases come from an industrial globalized food system controlled by these corporations. 14% from the production, fossil fuels and fossil fuel chemicals, 20% by invading into the Amazon to boost soybean, another 20% to transport food for miles, which we call food miles, to take good food and add all kinds of additives and turn it into ultra-processed food that makes us sick. 75% diseases today are chronic diseases related to processed food and chemical food. And then, because all of this needs lots of packaging, lots of plastic, lots of aluminum, the single biggest use of aluminum is now no more aeroplanes and cars. It is now food packaging because of the globalized system. All of that is another 20%. And when you create long distance systems and processed food, you have to have a best before date. And that means a lot of throwaway food, 4% goes in waste. So the polycrises we witness are a result directly of the old paradigm, a combination of a mechanistic epistemology, a greed-based economy, and a poison-based violent agriculture system. So what are the new horizons? First is a new paradigm of knowledge. And let me share with you the manifesto we did collectively. We actually did collective drafting. You can go to the Navdanya International website where you will find this manifesto to download. And please translate it into your languages. Translate it into Chinese and share it. So on the ecofeminist epistemology, which is both the new sciences emerging from every discipline, from ecological sciences, let me just share the principles we have laid out. Ecofeminist epistemology and ontology follow the basic ecological principles of nature's laws. And these laws are diversity, not monocultures. Nature never works in monocultures. Nature's self-organizing intelligence creates, maintains, and regenerates diversity. Where there is biodiversity, self-organization occurs. The natural world constantly strives for enriching biodiversity. And then synchronicity. My PhD was based on non-locality. Now, non-locality in quantum theory shows you that everything is connected. And a lot of my friends who have been inspired by quantum theory have realized that in a plant, every part of the plant is changing in a quantum coherent way. The synchronicity of the changes. Every part, every cell, every molecule, every leaf, every root is in concert. A very, very important principle of symbiosis. Everything is related and everything helps each other. Symbiosis is the interaction between two or more biological organisms that help each other. We are being helped by other organisms. In society, we are helped by each other. That is symbiosis in the social level is community. Creativity. A seed becoming a plant is creativity. People taking crops from their field and turning it into a wonderful cuisine is creativity. Our gut microbiome, 100 trillion of them, taking the food we eat and turning it into our blood, our cells, the working of our neurological system, all of that amazing work is creativity. Homeostasis. There's a tendency to come back to a steady system. Equilibrium. In natural systems, there is a constant urge, even though there might have been a storm, but things recover. And then the law of circularity. Nature doesn't work through linear extraction, which is the law of capital. Circularity means the water evaporates, it's evapotranspired, it falls down as snow and rain and comes back and circulates again. I've just come back from the Bay of Bengal, which is the most impacted area by climate change. And that's why I was there distributing seeds to women of climate resilient rice, so salt tolerant rice. But working with the scientists there, I realized the problem is not just that these cyclones are increasing from the sea. The problem is we treat every drop of water entering the sea as wasted water. And we create dams everywhere to interrupt the flow. And this is a problem both China and India have, damming rivers nonstop. But when the fresh water doesn't go, that's where the erosion increases. That's where the salinity increases. And every problem of climate change is aggravated 100-fold more because the lack of the equilibrium between fresh water and salt water. So everything is in cycles. We've also defined the new horizons of the new economy, and we call it the economy of care, because women and nature both work through the currency of care. And let me articulate this issue. The word currency means flow. Anything that flows, water flows, air flows, breath flows, nutrition flows, that's the food cycle. So flow is currency. And the real currency of life are all these qualities: the food, the water, the air, the breath, the care, the compassion, the solidarity. These things flow and relate, being to being, organism to organism, person to person. Colonialism didn't just change our ontology of how the world works. It reduced currency, which is a living phenomenon, into money and made investment the art of making money out of money. If you read Locke, it's all written in there. He redefined currency as money because that's what colonialism was about, and that's what capitalism is about, making money. So when you realize that what connects us in life is care and compassion, that's the economy of life, the art of living. Here are the principles: care for the earth and earth rights, human intelligence, autonomy, freedom and rights, regenerating community, reclaiming the commons, from competition to cooperation, from economics of greed to economics of care, from extractive to circular economies, from selfish thinking of my profits now in this moment to consideration and care for the rights of future generation, which in so many cultures, including ours in India, as well as the indigenous cultures of North America, we talk about the 7th generation to come. Whatever you have to do, think of the impact on the 7th generation. If it will leave a positive impact, take that step. But if you think it's going to cause harm, don't. Which is why, I mean, so many, printing, the Chinese innovation, fireworks, Chinese innovation. But we kept it all limited. We never turned it into a destructive force because we realized that thinking about the future generations is important. And from war and conflicts to peace and harmony. Because as you will have noticed, particularly with the ongoing conflict, that the military-industrial complex is the most profitable complex. And so much, the reason wars don't stop is that's where money gets made. Peace does not make money, but peace nourishes life. Now, with these new horizons and these new principles of knowledge and epistemology, of economy, what are the changes we have to make? And as you wrote in your introduction and spoke so beautifully, that the status quo is also fighting for survival. And it wants to survive at the cost of the 99%. Everything they're offering is an annihilation and extermination of the 99%. So they will survive. And I could give a lot of examples of this, but let me give you 3 of the most unreasonable ways in which, in the name of innovation, invention, and new science and new technology, absolute final planet grab is taking place. So just this morning, I think, the White House and President Biden have opened the gate. They've welcomed what Mr. Gates has been promoting, geoengineering. Now, we already have climate change because of pollution and use of fossil fuels. Solution to pollution is not more pollution, but Gates proposed geoengineering, which has put more pollution into the atmosphere, block the sun. And they say it'll cool the planet. No, it'll kill the planet because the sun is what gives life to this planet. The sunshine falls on the green leaf. It converts that energy and the carbon dioxide into the living molecules of life, the carbohydrates we eat, the oxygen we breathe. There is no technology that can surpass nature's technology. And nature, through this technology, turned this planet from a hot planet of 290 degrees centigrade to 13 degrees centigrade. From 98% carbon dioxide through the absorption, through the living green leaf to 0.03. And they want to kill that process, to kill the very process that allows life on this planet and offer it as a solution to a life-threatening problem is basically saying we'll destroy the planet. So many of them anyway think they're going to live on Mars, even though it's a dead planet. So geoengineering, blocking the sun. And it's bad science. I mean, they're talking about it as innovation. This is stupid science. It is irresponsible science. It is junk science. Take food. We've eaten food, and food is the currency of life. The nutrition of the soil soil feeds the plants feed us, and our gut microbiome. And everything is connected. When there's poisons in our food, our gut microbiome is disturbed. When we eat monocultures, our gut microbiome doesn't get the food it needs. So many diseases now are being recognized just in the last 10 years as a destruction of the gut microbiome. We know 75% of the diseases today are because of ultra-processed food, which includes chemicals. So here they're offering fake food now, which is ultra-processed to the ultimate level. You don't allow the soil to work, you don't allow the plant to work, you don't allow the food cycle to work. As Bayer has said, we have a report on this, all the talk on lab food and plant-based food is brilliant for them, because now agriculture will be with digital agriculture on a large scale, farming without farmers. Food without farms is the slogan of Mr. Gates. Farming without farmers, food without farms. So what will be growing in these big fields? It's not that agriculture will stop. It'll be producing raw materials. Food has become a raw material. You could go into your field and pick a carrot and eat it straight, or harvest a rice and just boil it and it's ready to eat. Now it'll just be carbohydrates and protein as feedstock for labs. Just like soya bean, which is such a delicious food, was transformed into feedstock for factory farms, which uses 100 times more energy to produce in an inefficient way. My assessment is this factory food system, the lab food system will use about 1,000 times more energy. And there is a new study that even though this is being offered in the name of solving climate change, just like geoengineering, it's a false solution, it's greenwashing. Studies don't get done, the propaganda spreads. There's a new study that shows it'll have 25 times more emissions. And I can say to someone who spent a lifetime understanding scientific systems, energy systems, physical systems, and food systems, that anything that uses more energy will create more entropy, will create more waste, will create more pollution. Finally, the whole issue of financialization of nature. This too is being rushed in the name of a climate solution and a solution to the crisis of ecology. And they're trying to create nature's markets everywhere. And they say by this, we will create nature's value, as if we don't value nature. We know nature's sacred. We know nature's priceless. We know every life form has immense value of life, not money. So they've created just last year or the year before, 2 years ago, Rockefeller Foundation and the New York Stock Exchange created a whole class of companies called nature asset companies. And these basically are designed to take over the world's resources. And if you notice, indigenous people are being driven off their land because their biodiversity is now being grabbed by this new economy. Farmers are being driven. Just today, I've read about 4 areas in US, in India, in UK, Netherlands. Farmers are being driven off the land to create nature reserves. So what will these nature asset companies do? Called nature asset companies or NAC, the vehicle will allow for the formation of specialized corporations that hold the rights to the ecosystem services. Just get it. So first they created private property to own land, to own seed. Now they want to own the functions of nature as their property and their asset. The green leaf that does photosynthesis and gives you oxygen, that will be their property. So the specialized corporations, they hold the rights to the ecosystem services produced on a given chunk of land, services like carbon sequestration or clean water. These NACs will then maintain, manage, and grow the natural assets that commodify the part of the ecosystem that's valuable. That is how the forests of our Himalaya were commodified and destroyed so that there could be timber mines. That's what my sisters of Tipur rose against. Now, in the name of protecting nature, they want to extract the last bit of life from nature. And they are dreaming of a $4,000 trillion economy. And they're working very hard at it. And elements of this are biodiversity offsets, carbon offsets, zero budget, all kinds of new financial tricks combined with new fake science tricks. And the big shifts we need on New Horizon is first, of course, a paradigm shift that the earth is living and we are members of a living earth. We're part of an earth family. That's the new ecological civilization. To live together in symbiosis with all beings on earth and as different cultures on earth. If growth was the extractive measure that has driven this machine of money making, degrowth has to be the way we grow life and shrink the greed economy. And of course we have to deglobalize. That's the work I do. We build amazing local economies, local seed banks, local ecological agriculture, local markets. And I want to give you two figures. By growing more biodiversity, we grow twice the amount of nutrition, because we don't measure yield per acre, we measure nutrition per acre. And we can have more nutrition by conserving more biodiversity, not growing more commodities, but growing more nourishment. And the farmers in a local economy are earning 10 times more than those chasing the global supply chains, where there is nothing left for the farmers. Of course, reclaiming the commons, because without reclaiming the commons, we cannot grow the solidarity and community that we need to de-link from the domination of money. And I am so glad that there's a huge push right now for a de-dollarization of the world. And that is necessary, because if these natural asset companies with trading in Wall Street has to be interrupted, we have to have not just other local economies with multiple currencies of food and water and love and compassion, but we also have to have other national economies with other currencies. So the new horizons are waiting for us to walk. Thank you.